Hello and welcome to the shop. It's time to start working on a Christmas order. Although it's now August, I got the order in July, so Christmas in July. The customer wanted a clock, but the customer was very much intrigued by the coarseness and the wildness of the grain in this cherry burl, this wild cherry burl. I did a piece a few months back using this cherry burl where I made a vase that, as I was hollowing it, split away and made it even more expressive. And she really appreciated the very active character in the grains and the contrast. These included areas here will have a much darker color and even some black to it, and some of the exterior bark areas will have some real dark color. So my challenge is multiple. First of all, I can't, because of the coarseness of this grain, I can't mount the clock face directly into the cherry. I'm going to be missing a lot of that once I get it turned and smooth and leveled, and I want to give it some shape, a little bit of addition, so that it kind of embraces the face of the clock. So my plan to solve the issue of how rough the character is here is to take this piece of maple, I believe it's maple, pretty sure it's maple, and turn a disc with a recess in it to mount the clock face. That'll contrast with the black bezel. And then I think I'm going to recess that into this piece of mahogany. And all of that is going to be mounted to the cherry via this piece of teak, which will also serve as a little bit of a I don't know what you'd want to call it, a probe. I'm going to turn a bit of a ledge on the end so that it'll sit in a recess, kind of a tenon to sit in a recess, and that way, in order to remove the clock, rather than trying to pry it out, you can simply just push the whole assembly against this little tenon, and it'll pop the clock out so that you can take the back off here and change the battery or change the time. Then you just pop the clock and just pull the whole assembly back out onto this piston. That's what it is, it's a piston. And pop the clock back in. That way you're not trying to grab and pry the edges of the bezel and marring up the bezel. You can push it from behind, get access, and then replace it. I don't know whether or not that'll work, but I also feel like I don't want this whole assembly sitting in the cherry. I think I want it to stand proud with a slight dish shape here to kind of embrace the refined features of the clock face and the bezels it'll be in. I want to kind of have a contrast of smooth, shiny, and then the coarseness of the burl. So we're going to get started and see, first of all, I'm going to have to figure out a way to mount this, and I need to clean it up with the wire brush, and then I'm going to have to address this face, and I'm going to have to make some decisions about these two faces, which are rough sawed with a chainsaw, and I think I'm probably just going to keep the chainsaw marks, but I still need to sand a little bit on these faces. But the first thing I need to do is get this base nice and flat so that this will stand on a shelf or whatever. It is slightly wedge shaped. You can see it's narrower here and it's wider here. We'll take care of that on the lathe. So I also have to make some decisions about which direction I want to mount it, what's going to be the back and what's going to be the front. I'm leaning very hard towards this being the front because this has the most damage to it and it's going to give the most character, which is really what the customer is looking for, is this coarseness of character that's going on in the grain. So let's get started. rid of that. I can't really find a center here. So I'm going to have to glue a sacrifice block onto this face so that I can smooth this face and then create a tenon, and then I'll have to turn that sacrifice block away. So I'm probably going to use hot glue, simply because I do not have an even surface here. So prep on this piece is definitely the challenge. Let me get set up for the hot glue gun, and we'll give it a second. Okay, I do want to explain that normally hot glue probably is not the best route to take with this. And if I had a jointer, I would probably joint one side of this to get it nice and flat, and then I would most likely either use the painter's tape and CA glue method, or just straight CA glue it and then turn it away later. However, I don't have a jointer, and I really don't want to spend the next 6 hours with a sander sanding this flat. So the solution is hot glue, which is going to, it has dimension, it's thick, and should help to fill the gaps in the surface. Hot glue isn't the best choice necessarily when you're turning, because hot glue does have some flex. Hot glue does have a little cushioning and a little elasticity. However, for simply the task of flattening this and then putting a tenon on one side so that I can get it into a chuck, I think hot glue is going to be safe. I will, of course, maintain this between centers as well. So I think we'll be okay, we'll be fairly safe. I will be between centers, so I'm going to mark a center here and punch it. And then I'm hoping that'll just kind of help us balance out the fact that this is going to be fairly off balance until it isn't. And help me get this clean, level, and tenon on it. I don't necessarily want to put a recess on it. This is end grain. We're looking straight up and down on the grain here. And the energy of this piece of wood is already moving outward. If I put a recess in there with an expanding chuck, I could just push it apart and have it explode on me. Whereas if I put a tenon on it, on end grain, it's always best to put a tenon on end grain. It compresses it rather than expanding it. So, a little dust. That dust can interfere with our bond. We're going to go ahead and just really give this a good heavy dose of hot glue. All of this will be turned away, so I'm not necessarily concerned about having a bunch of glue in there as much as I'm concerned about making sure I have a bond of some kind so that I can get this between centers, get a tenon on the opposite side. So this is all prep work. I'm actually not going to turn this yet. I'm prepping it. First, I'm going to make the bezel. That way I know what I'm doing when I make the main body. But I want to make sure I'm as prepped as I can be, so that once I start turning, I can keep it moving forward. This project's going to take me a day or two, but I definitely don't want to spend an excessive amount of time if I can help it. So again, I'm just globbing on the hot glue here because it isn't the most reliable way to do this. But for this application, probably the best solution given the circumstances. And if I had had a more solid center on the opposite side, if I'd been able to punch a center, I would have just gone straight between centers. But because there's no center there, I have to create something stable enough that I can put it between centers, which is why I chose to hot glue this to a nice flat milled piece of maple. Okay, while the main body of the piece is drying, I'm going to go ahead and prep the first bezel. And I'm actually going to flatten this off and using CA glue turn this into a sacrifice mount so that I can get this the shape that is desired. So first I need to flatten off the sacrifice block, and then we'll mount it. Alright, we're going to let that set for a minute, and we will get this round, start working on hollowing it. So this bezel, I believe, is 3 inches. Just under 3 inches, and looking at a depth of 5/8. A little bit more than 5/8, a little bit under 11/16. Most likely that's about 13 millimeters, but I don't have metric on this meter, on this caliper. Now this does have little friction knobs, so I would probably end up making it 3 inches. It's just a 1/1000th of an inch less than 3 inches. So I'll probably make it 3 inches so that the friction knobs work, but we'll have to check and test it multiple times. The depth, oh, I have more than enough. I have definitely sufficient depth in this piece so that I can create a bottom. So I'm not real worried about that. That's good. And here's our first attempt at fitting. Okay, and as I predicted, I shot a little bit under purposefully so that I can creep up on the size. So we're going to take a little bit more out, and I'm going to sight down over the top of the parting tool so that I make sure that I line it up with the bedway of the lathe so that I'm perpendicular, exactly perpendicular to the bottom here, so I have straight sides, as straight as I can make them. That's still too tight. I need to take a little bit more out. This is crucial because this has to fit firmly, but you also have to be able to pull it out or push it out from behind, which is the way I'm going to create this, so that you can put batteries in the clock and change the time. I will tell you, if you choose to turn in reverse, make sure you have a lock screw on your chuck, otherwise it will unscrew off of the lathe. You need to make sure you have that safety feature if you're going to try this. Still too tight. Let me take some more off. I thought I got quite a bit off that time, but I guess not. Now the reason to turn it in reverse is so that you're not reaching over and trying to get at that angle. It just gives you a straighter shot. There are other ways to do it. But I find for me, when I'm working on this fine of tolerances, that's probably the way that I'm able to produce the most accuracy. Okay, I still need to open this up just a hair more. There we go, that's getting closer. Still real tight. You may need to push the base out a little. Alright, so another way to do this, I'm going to turn the lathe back in the correct direction. And again, using the screw, I'm going to take it in an almost vertical position, very high position. Make sure that the angle of my blade here is parallel to the bed of the lathe. I'm just very lightly going to push straight in. Make sure I can see. So this is actually a slice, not a scrape. What I'm worried about is I see it to be narrowing a bit at the bottom, so I want to make sure that I slice down and widen that back out so that it's not pinching when I put the clock in the cylinder it's not pinching it and pushing it back out. Let's see how that works. Better. Still too tight. I need this to be accessible for the customer. I definitely don't want her sitting there trying to pry it out, so if we could do that one more time, just as lightly as possible. Okay, that's pretty good, and I can see that I still need to take a hair more depth off the bottom. I'm even. And the way I am designing this clock, I'm actually going to have a piston in the back to push the clock out through the bezel. For multiple reasons, one being the way it looks, the other being ease of changing the batteries and setting the time. Okay, so this is very, very smooth. I'm going to hit it with 220 once just to make sure there are no rough edges and soften this a little bit, but I'm not going to get into extensive sanding in here. This face, however, is going to be a presentation face, so I will be doing a little bit more here, but not yet. And the reason I drew this line is because that's how wide I want that to be. That's going to give me a bright contrast on the outside of that black bezel. And then I'm going to sink this into a piece of mahogany and round it and give it a little bit of shape. So at this point, what I'm going to do is simply cut this into a cylinder so that I can take the mahogany, mount it the same way I've got this mounted, and cut it out so that this cylinder fits inside that cylinder. Then we're going to glue it. So right now, while I've got it here, I'm going to hit it with 220, and I'm calling that the inside part here done. Okay, I've got a very good fit here. Actually, I had to pry it out. So now what I'm going to do is get some wood glue in here, and then we're going to clamp these, and that's got to dry overnight. So the first part of production of this clock piece is pretty much done. So what we have is the clock fits inside this maple bezel, which is going to fit inside this mahogany bezel, so that I have some contrast with the black bezel on the clock itself. After I've got this glued together, this is going to get shaped, kind of a rounded back. So after it's glued, I will form this little edge here, and then I will turn away a shape on the base. I'll reverse it, turn away a shape on the base, and get some kind of a form, something that it would like. And then what I'm going to do is drill all the way through it, and then I'm going to create a wider area here, which will be the head of a tenon or a piston the whole thing will rest on. And so the customer, when she wants to change the time or change the battery, can just push this whole unit against that piston. It'll push the clock out. When she puts the clock in, she'll just pull it tight. That will be mounted against the cherry base. So let me get the glue and a piece of cardboard to protect the bed rails, and we will get this glued up and clean. Okay, the clamps are off, and we got a good glue up. So this is a tiny bit proud, which is fine. I actually kind of want that. I'm going to round this over and make a second bevel, and then give some shape here. But let's double check, make sure we didn't have any weird expansions or contractions during the night while the glue was setting. Oh no, we're perfect. We are still exactly where we need to be. Good dry wood. And again, so that the customer doesn't have to do what I'm doing right now to get the clock back out, to put a battery in or to change the time, I will be drilling a hole here, essentially fashioning a piston out of teak. That's going to serve as both a mount to the base and to make it easier to remove the clock for maintenance. So I'm going to build a piston here. I need to know what my widest side here is so that I can drill accordingly. And I'm just over 3/4. So I think I'm going to drill the first hole at 3/4, and then the shaft is probably going to be 5/8. Let me get set up to drill. I'm just going to set this here to kind of protect the rails. Future project. I just cracked the CA glue that was holding that. So like I said, I could feel and hear when I pass through the mahogany and into the walnut. I've got plenty of room here so that I can work this shape some more. So I'm going to get this, I'm going to get a jam chuck made, jam this, and then turn the bottom. Okay, so this is the back side. I'm remembering now how I set this up yesterday. This is the back side of the piece. This is going to be the base. So I need to get a tenon here. Then I'll be able to clear away this waste block, shape the face, do some other things, then remove the tenon. Most vital thing here is to get this flat and then get a tenon in here, and it looks like I'm only going to be able to do a 2-inch tenon simply because of how badly damaged by insects and inclusions this burl is. And actually, before I put this on a chuck, I'm going to take it over to the workbench and see if I can pry most of this hot glue. Just pry this sacrifice block away rather than turning it. This is a good piece of maple, and I can reuse it in the future if I can salvage it, if I can get it off of this piece of cherry. Alright, so we've already gone through the first grit, and I see that as a warning that now comes the real fun part. But it is the part that brings out the beauty and the piece. It's time to sand. You're going to get a time lapse of it, because watching somebody sand is boring as hell, which is why we're doing it live on TikTok as well. We need to get the drill bit up to the face to see if dead center is going to be effective, or if I'm going to need to drill somewhere like over here. And honestly, I may drill it offset anyway, simply because that then accentuates the coarseness in the features, which is why the customer wanted this piece of wood. So let's move the drill bit up here and just take a look at what it's going to look like, if it's even, so yeah, if I drill right there, if I drill at what is effectively center, that's not going to look good. That's not going to be right at all. However, if I drill right here, roughly, and that's where I put my mounting peg, that I think is what's going to give us a very nice balance, maybe a little bit lower. So I actually can't decide where I'm going to drill my hole until I flatten the base, because I'm going to lose some height here. So I need to decide if I'm going to drill it, if it's going to be down here or up here. But I'm leaning real hard to this region being where I put my mounting hole, so that I can put the piston in there. And again, it's only going to be about that far away, and specifically so that the customer can take it, lay it on its back, push on it. That'll loosen the clock enough that she can get her fingers behind it and pull it out in order to change the time and stuff. Yeah, I like that region. I'm just going to scribble a little bit here. give myself a mark. And so this is going to end up getting drilled on the workbench. I've sanded the face to 320, which is about as fine as I want to go so that the tung oil gets a purchase into the wood and can begin to seal as it polymerizes. So now what we're going to do is we're going to reverse it and take the tenon off of the base. We're just going to round this over, give it a little slight curve to match up with the shape of the face of that clock, of that base. This is just shelf liner. It's perfect for padding for an application like this. And most likely what I'm going to do is sometime later today, after I'm done doing this, take the hot glue and just glue this pad onto this piece. Because that's actually the shape that I'll probably use off for jams. So the key here is to make sure that you're even, that you're straight on. So if you kind of put your thumbnail up, turn it on, if it's even, you'll only hit and you'll just rub the whole thing. This is a little bit off. You move it a little bit, reapply pressure. That's pretty close to dead on. It's close enough that it's really not going to make a difference as far as finishing the base here. A piece like this that's not balanced and not square and not, rough edge, it's kind of hard sometimes to get it all to line out exactly. So I'm just going to smooth. I really need to keep the width here, so I'm really just going to kind of smooth this transition a little bit and level off the base. I'm going to get that a little bit thinner, and I am not going to take it all the way off on the lathe because I don't want this to fly. We will take it over to the workbench. We'll break out a chisel. We'll chisel this little nub off and then do some sanding. Yay for sanding! That's as far as I want to go. I've got good solid wood surface here, but I really don't want to take any risks of sending this block of burl flying because it's the last piece of this burl of this size that I have. I still have some more of it that I could take a chainsaw to, but I've done a lot of work on this. Too much work to lose it and blow it in half if I launch it across the room. So this little jam works really, really well. And like I said, I'm probably going to take some hot glue later and just glue the pad on it and keep this. That's a good little friction drive, friction chuck, whatever you want to call it. So we're going to head over to the workbench and reset for more sanding. Yay! Let's try this again. Okay, so on the sanding belt sander, I gave it a little bit of a lean. It won't hold itself up. But I did that so that it would counterbalance the weight of the bezel and the clock face. So with this in place, it should hold itself up. Let's see if I have a way to test that. Counterbalance is going to work. Yep, works just fine. And that was my intention. So this is actually going to be floating above. And so now what I need to do is get my angle here. And this is just rough, not trying to be exact, but I want to get it fairly close so that I can drill this hole so that as it's standing on the surface, my clock face oriented perpendicular to the floor. I'm going to go a little bit deeper. Whoop, maybe not. There we go. So again, this will stand right like that. I think that's going to look really good. But we need to turn our piston out of this piece of teak. Okay, so I have this nice piece of teak here. And what I'm going to do essentially is make a piston. This is just over 3/4 of an inch thick. And the head of my piston needs to be 3/4 of an inch. So basically, as I get it round, that's going to be the size of the piston. This is too long. So I'm going to get it round, I'm going to lop it off, and then I am going to mount it into the pin jaws of my chuck and finish the formation. I've got this depth that I have to make sure is just as close to exact. It can be a little less, but it cannot be a little more. It's got to be as close to exact depth of the recess that I have, the mortise in the bezel. And then I will probably turn this a little bit too long, the 5/8 inch shaft, probably be too long, so that I can figure out where my point of balance is and then just saw off the end so that when I glue it into the final piece, it creates the perfect counterbalance for the weight of the clock versus the angle of the base. check our fit. And there's our 3/4. Then we have to take this down to 5/8 for the rest. Okay, so we're back at the workbench, and as you can see, I've got way too much space here for my piston. I only need it to travel about 1/4 of an inch, maybe 1/2 an inch max. So I'm going to remove some of that. So we've done our dry fit. We know the concept works, and it's fit pretty darn good. That should do it. Look at that. I freaking love it when a plan comes together. So I've got counterbalance, holds my clock up. Fairly parallel, fairly perpendicular, I say, to the ground. I will put little feet on here, but in order to get the clock out, you just push the bezel, and in order to remount the clock, you just push on the clock and pull on the bezel. Let's see, how much clearance? Yeah. So I have just about a 1/16 of an inch clearance underneath here so that the bezel is not actually resting on the ground. I like it. I like it. People were looking at me cross-eyed in the comments when I explained what I was doing, but dry fit, it makes perfect sense and it works. And that's what's important. Well, there it is, dry fit. It's got the first coat of finish on it. I'm pretty happy with this piece. I'm very happy with this piece, actually. That made me need to make something like it for myself.